Hey, leader, I hope you're doing well today. I am absolutely elated to jump into today's content. We are going to be talking about conflict resolution. So we're going to do a three-part series on resolving conflict. Today is 101. It is some sort of a general overview of why to resolve conflict, how, and even where you're going to find conflict. Now, on that thought, you're going to find conflict in any relationship that matters anything to you, that holds any weight or has a stake in your life, whether it be marriage, friendships, team members, direct reports, people who directly report to you, up, down, all around. In every relationship, we are going to experience some sort of conflict. Now, it does not mean that a relationship is irreparable. If we experience conflict, it does not mean always that it is absolutely dysfunctional. Okay. Conflict doesn't always equate to dysfunction. A lot of times we assume that, so we give up on it, the relationship. And really, we need to probably pull back and just ask ourselves, can this be simply resolved in a conversation? I like to say that the magic, the juice, the secret sauce is always found in a conversation. I think it's time as leaders that we get face to face with people again and resolve the conflict. And typically, a lot of conflict, I would dare to say 80 to 90% of conflict is resolved in a single conversation, at least from my experience and those whom I have the honor and privilege of coaching. Okay, so I want to give you some ways today that we might resolve conflict as a leader. And again, whether it's up, down, or side to side, no matter who it is, we're going to experience conflict. But today, we are going to approach it through the lens of our workplace, our team members, those who work beside us, those who we report to, those who report to us. Okay, so what is conflict resolution? It is the informal or formal process that two or more parties use to find a peaceful solution to their dispute. The informal or formal process that two or more parties use to find a peaceful solution to their dispute. Okay, emphasis on process. It's going to be a process, whether it's a process within a conversation, which we're going to get to in just a moment, or over multiple conversations. But conflict resolution in the workplace is a worthy matter. Okay, so let's talk about really quickly 6 general steps to resolving conflict. I hope you're ready because I am stoked for this. 6 general steps to resolving conflict. Okay, number 1, agree to talk. Agree to talk. When you establish that agreement, make sure that you communicate your intent as well. So, hey, Brian, man, I would love to get face to face with you. It's very obvious that we have things that we need to work through, that we need to work out. And my intent in this conversation is for you and I to find a resolution mutually so that we can all move forward for the greater good. Why? Because this relationship, this situation, this matters to me. You matter to me. Us resolving this matters to me. And again, as a result, the whole thing can now move forward. So Brian, man, let's be that example. Let's go resolve this like adults, like professionals. Okay, so you agreed to talk. I would say that you would go as far as you can to meet in person. Now, again, I understand that there are a lot of virtual concepts out there. You might work for an all virtual platform or organization. So maybe you cannot meet in person, but as much as you can get face to face, that's what matters. Okay, because you need to see the nonverbals. We'll get into that in a different teaching if we haven't already covered it, but we need to see some nonverbals. Okay, we need to see the expressions on their face. 55% of communication is nonverbal, according to a certain study that we study here at VLA. Okay, so meet in person. Of course, we need to, if we cannot resolve it one-on-one and we're just continuously going around in circles, we might need to pull in a mediator. There was a situation where years ago with a coworker of mine, we were going around and around. So finally, I got one of our leaders in the organization. I said, "Hey, man, just come sit in with us and listen to us hash this out." And it's actually one of my favorite things to do as a leader is sit in on meetings that they're going around in circles, because I want to help them find a mutual resolve. So this guy and I was going back and forth, and then finally, my coworker just stopped us and said, "Hey, you realize you're both wanting the same thing. Matter of fact, you're both saying the same thing. You're just saying it extremely differently." And in a matter of 5 minutes, the 5-week conflict was resolved. So we hugged it out and went our own ways, and the whole thing, we moved forward because of it, and the whole organization moved forward because of it. So just again, remember, face-to-face is the best way. And if you cannot resolve it in a matter of, I don't know, a few conversations or however, many, then pull in a mediator. There's nothing wrong with that. But so that's number one, agree to talk and communicate intent. And again, remember, the importance of face-to-face is because that 55% of communication is nonverbal. Okay. Number two, and now we're in the context of the conversation. Number two, give them room to talk. Don't be the person that only listens to respond and not listens to understand. So give them room to talk. Don't be overbearing. That won't resolve anything. Okay, not saying don't talk at all, because you need to lay out your perspective and share how you feel. But we must give the other person room to talk. The more we speak over somebody, every time I interrupt them, every time I shoot back quicker than necessary, the way I see it in my mind is that I am building a wall between us, brick by brick, every single time I interrupt them. And the point of the conversation when it comes to conflict resolution is for us to do everything that we possibly can for walls not to be built. Otherwise, you're not really trying to resolve the conflict. You're just trying to make your case or make your point, or maybe even convince them to come to your side. You can't convince them, you can't allow them to see your perspective if you are building a wall. They can't see over the wall. So again, as a leader, we must apply empathy and understanding and a listening ear to the person across the way if they really mean something to you, if resolving the conflict really matters to you. So you've communicated your intent that you want to resolve this, but if all we do when we get into the meeting is interrupt and not give them any room to talk, then our first move by agreeing to talk, communicating your intent, is pretty hypocritical at best, right? So number two, give them room to talk, okay? Number three, again, we are in the context of the conversation. So identify the conflict that matters. Identify the conflict, get to the bottom of it, get to the root of it. The other person might be reacting out of something that happened a year or two ago that was never resolved between you. And every other conflict is just simply stacking up on top of one another. So we got to get to the absolute root of it. Ask questions, inquire, be the most interested person in the room. Ask them how you can do better. So identify the conflict, get to the bottom of it, get to the root of it, okay? And that comes oftentimes by asking questions and listening, okay? That's number three. Number four, of course, now resolve the conflict. Now, conversation could have lasted a while at this point. It could be really quickly. There's no really time stamp on it, how quickly you could resolve conflict in a conversation. But once you do resolve the conflict, once you resolve it, you agree on the next steps. So number 4, resolve the conflict and agree on next steps. So you would say something like, okay, Brian, moving forward, how can I do this better? And then hopefully they have enough humility maybe to ask a similar question. But how can I how can I do this better? How can I avoid, miscommunicating to you again? How can I do better? So assume, responsibility. That's what a mature and wise leader does oftentimes. So resolve the conflict and agree on next steps. And a little bit of a, thought here. If you cannot agree on next steps, nothing wrong with, again, pulling in the mediator and getting their unbiased, 30,000-foot view advice. Okay. So you can revisit another day, maybe when emotions settle. We're going to get into a lot more nuance of the conversation and what ifs in the next couple parts of this. So that's number 4. Okay. Number 5, after you agree on the next steps, it is important to repeat the solution to one another. Okay. Repeat it to one another. So what I'm hearing you say is, I should, or I need to, I ought to do this, this, and this. And then hopefully that they come back and say, yes, this is what I heard you say, etc. Because what you say might not be what somebody hears. Oftentimes, I found myself so misunderstood because I wasn't clear, or I wasn't saying it maybe how they would understand it. So I said one thing and I meant one thing, but they heard and interpreted that as something completely different. Well, you said this. No, I didn't say that. I said this. Well, that's how I took it. Well, that's not what I said. So you ever been there before? Around and around you go. So repeating the solution to one another, repeating what you heard, kind of recapping, I think is really important. Okay. And then number 6, I love to slap a little bit of integrity on it. Follow through. Simply follow through. And can I just say this? It's very interesting to me and quite intriguing that the people in my life who I have had in the workplace and personally, who I have had, at least some people, the most conflict with, I am now closest to. Conflict can oftentimes breed proximity if you resolve it correctly and you are honest and authentic with how you feel, and you are humble enough to admit when you are wrong and be willing to grow.